Welcome to Invisible, Breaking Through the Stigma of Addiction. I'm your host, Dean Anderson, and this is a show where we talk about addiction in our community in London, Ontario, and the things that we can do to help and make our community a better place. On today's episode, we have an icon in the recovery community that I know many know, and I'm sure that she's got some wonderful stories to share with us. On today's episode, we have Bev Thomson.
Thank you so much, Dean. I guess I was a little surprised when you invited me to come on the show. I did spend a lot of time working in the field of addictions, but I guess I thought my time was maybe up and there was others coming along, and that worked well for me. However, here I am, and I hope that it's useful to some. Some of the experiences that I had years and years ago, and how things have progressed through the years, but how I would like to see even more of what we have already and improved and open to the community, not only in London, but in the province of Ontario, I would say.
Thank you so much. I think you still have tons to contribute, and I recognize you as a trailblazer, and for the people that don't recognize, you were one of the original founders or members that helped to found Westover Treatment Centre in Thamesville, which has since helped thousands of people to find their way into recovery. So, and then you're still now to this day part of the recovery community. So when your name, I said this earlier, when your name comes up, people go, oh, I know Bev. So there's a wealth of knowledge. We recognize the value that comes from that, and we certainly don't want to ever overlook that. Or there's also things that we know from the past that can help us from repeating the same future. And it's really relevant for us to have these conversations. And I think that you've got a wealth, even just the conversations we had prior to turning on the cameras, there's a wealth of knowledge and experience there that's just, it's immeasurable. So I'll thank you again for being on the show.
Well, it's my pleasure. My family, my children were getting a big kick out of this. I think I should put my feet up and retire, but here I am. So I'm delighted to be here.
So I recognize that your career, the time and service put into the addiction community as more of a purpose-driven life than a job. Would you agree?
I always felt that I never went to work a day. I was one of the ones that was very fortunate. I loved what I did, and I was excited. Certainly when there was the prospects of opening up a treatment center, and I'm sure that here in the community we must never forget Sister St. Patrick, and she was very instrumental in helping us get things started, because certainly nobody in the government knew who Bev was, but a lot of people knew who St. Patrick was. And so we worked together. It was a cast of thousands, I always say, because none of us knew everything. Some of us knew a little bit, and all together, there it is. The Westover Treatment Centre, as you say, that has serviced thousands of people. And little did we realize that that was going to happen when we were going down there with our own buckets to clean the place and bring the men from St. Stephen's House, which St. Patrick ran, to do some of the work, because we had no money. And so the work had to all be volunteer. I mean, when people look at it now and they think, oh, isn't that just wonderful? And it is, but very humble beginnings. And we just had a lot of ambition, a lot of excitement, a lot of hope. So it just worked out, and a lot of faith. A lot of faith, because
I bet.
There were times when we wondered, is it going to make it or not? But it did.
I was reading the story. I have a book that was written by someone about the origin of Westover, and I was reading through it. And there was, originally supposed to be in St. Mary's, and then that fell through, and then ended up being in Thamesville, where it is now.
I think I might have written that book. I think it might have. I've certainly contributed to it. I don't know who they said the author was, but
yeah, I'm pretty sure that you're a contributing author. And
Yeah.
then it was another person who is currently now, I believe, a counselor at Westover who.
Oh, Brenda?
Brenda,
maybe?
yeah, it
Yeah,
was Brenda.
Oh, well, sure. I mean, I didn't know anything about writing a book, believe me.
Yeah.
But I knew some information that
Yeah.
would contribute
Yeah.
so that the book would be an interesting read.
Absolutely, and it goes back to what we were talking about earlier about how the landscape has changed. And when Westover was open, there was no such thing in the area. It didn't kind of exist. I mean, and you were saying earlier about there not being withdrawal management.
No. Well, when I was first involved in addictions with my own recovery, there were no detoxes. There was no withdrawal management. Call them whatever you want to. There was nothing. And so if we had someone that we thought needed some medical help of some sort or needed something, we maybe weren't sure what they needed, but we sure knew they needed something. We would try to get them into the emergency of the hospitals, but they were never particularly happy to see us, I can tell you, and understandably so, because they really weren't terribly trained to work with addictions. It was mostly alcoholism in those days, at least certainly anything that I had anything to do with. But there was always, again, going back a long time, there was that common thread, that common person of Sister St. Patrick. And she had some influence at St. Joseph's Hospital. And so we worked with her. And then it wasn't very long, a few years into it, when, of course, they were called detox centers then. They began to open and things were a lot different. There was no Westover. There was in Toronto places like Donwood, but there certainly weren't the community-based programs like Westover was. And they weren't nearly as handy. What we could do now was have people go to the detox here in London, withdrawal management is now called, and they would be prepared there to go to the Westover Treatment Centre. There was a treatment down in St. Thomas at the St. Thomas Psychiatric Hospital.
Yeah, which is closed now.
It is closed now.
I think so, yeah.
But it was there, but it certainly helped a lot of people. But this program that we were setting up at Westover was based on the disease model, the 12-step model, and the basis of the program was that the alcoholism, the disease, emotional, mental, physical, spiritual, the holistic approach.
Yeah.
And as you said, I think earlier, there's been thousands and thousands helped, so I guess the idea was a good one. What do you think?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That facility has impacted my life personally, and then even through my work, I have the gift of being able to make referrals and help people find their
wonderful.
way into Westover
Wonderful.
Treatment Centre,
Good.
and to be able to participate in that pre and post journey with people as they're healing is absolutely
just
phenomenal.
wonderful.
Absolutely phenomenal.
I just remembered, I should have mentioned this sooner. We don't ever want to forget Brian and Nancy Gallagher,
Right.
because Brian was the one with the idea. I always said he had the idea and he put me to work.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, it was his idea and he knew exactly what he wanted to have. And there were lots of times we wondered if we were going to get there, but we did. And then after we were in business for a little while, I think 4 or 5 years, Nancy was always promoting, I think would be a fair word, the family program, the codependent program. And with a lot of hard work on her part, and a gentleman by the name of Jovid Mendonça, who was the program director at Westover at that time. Together, they put together this program, and for a long time, they came from well, I guess they still do, all over the place to the codependent program, and you very often hear more about that codependent program than you do the actual chemical dependent program, because there are so few of them, and it has been very successful.
Absolutely agree. On the show, we talk about the impacts of the family, and we talk about the codependency. We've had people on from that program on here.
Oh, wonderful.
I've even participated in and did the residential program myself. I went and stayed there and did yeah, absolutely. It was a wonderful experience. And like you said, it's a very rare commodity. They don't really exist anywhere else, but we see the massive impact that substance use has on family members, but there's not a lot being done about it.
It is not unusual for me to be in Toronto, we'll say, when they find out where I lived and where I came from and so on. Lots and lots of people in Toronto will say, "Oh, I know Westover. I was at the codependent program." So it was a privilege. It was a privilege for me to have anything to do with it, really, and it was not my idea, but I felt very blessed that I was able to do the little bit that I did do. Sister St. Patrick, I should refer to her as, knew a lot of people in the government. In those days, it was the Addiction Research Foundation, now
It's CAMH.
Yeah.
Okay.
But she had friends there. She knew people within the ministry that got our foot in the door. As I said, a cast of thousands. We would not have accomplished what we were able to accomplish had it not been for this wide variety of professionals.
So the landscape has changed from a funding model as well. I mean, we're seeing a lot more influx. I mean, not as much as we need, a lot more influx of government funding and money coming in, and a lot of places that are they're trying to keep people out of emergency rooms and keep them somewhere else. So they're sending funding because it's really expensive to be in an emergency room. But you had to, I mean, my understanding was a lot of this funding had to come from private donors, or, I mean, even your experience with St. Stephen's was the same, correct?
Yeah, always. We never did get funding. Well, the sisters were the ones that, the St. Stephen's house originated again from Sister St. Patrick. And of course, she was a member, she was part of the St. Joseph community. And so they funded St. Stephen's house. But the time came when they were no longer able to do that. They were cutting back on the houses that they had. And so I happened to, by that time, I left Westover, and I always say my husband wanted to make sure that I had something to do, so he told Sister St. Patrick that I would be happy to help her out at St. Stephen's. She was by that time ill and knew that she wasn't going to be living that much longer. And so I began a little stint, which I thought was a little stint. I was there for 20 years. But during that time, had to find ways to make the money. We did apply at one point for money from the government. We were turned down, and we thought, well, we might be turned down, but we're not closing down. And so with again, always the cast of thousands, I was able to find ways to raise money so that we were able to stay in business, and that is still the case.
Amazing. That's the purpose-driven stuff that I hear, and today we're looking for funding and donors or things to, or we're expecting handouts, or the government should be paying for these things. But then back then you had to do all that stuff on your own, and it's a testament to all the hard work, even now today, that's needing to be done to keep some of these places open, right?
Yeah. And there's not nearly enough. I mean, there just is not nearly enough. I mean, I am sure you know, working in the field, that I talk mostly about alcoholism, but drug addiction is just running rampant. And there just is such a need for these houses. They don't stay in treatment for long, long periods of time, but they need rehabilitation for long periods of time.
Right.
And these houses do wonderful work. I learned that from being at St. Stephen's. I really enjoyed St. Stephen's. It was just for men then.
Yeah.
And then I was very fortunate. I got to know a lady who was interested in the work that I was doing. And she also, well, there's no other way to put it, she was, I would say, wealthy. And she liked the work that we were doing. And so when she passed on money to St. Stephen's. And with that money, there was a woman's house. And there is now a St. Stephen's for women and a St. Stephen's for men. No funding from the government at all.
Wonderful.
The money is raised through donations, and people who maybe have, well, certainly different foundations, there's no doubt about that, but there's golf tournaments and all sorts, walkathons. And,
I've participated in several
yeah,
of
and
those things.
all of the people that have gone through these places are able to help. They are now great alumni, volunteers, so
Love it.
it mushrooms.
I love it. So we're going to switch gears. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to switch gears because I got a lot of questions to talk about the actual addiction side of things and not just the structural stuff. So we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more Bev Thomson. And welcome back to Invisible, and we have the lovely Bev Thomson here today. Bev, I know that we're talking a lot about the history and the way the system works, but really I know that you've got 20 years plus, but 20 years of working like right in the front lines and working with mostly men dealing with substance use and addiction. And I would love to hear some of that and some of your perspectives on what it means to work through addiction, or what are some of the things that have helped people be the most successful in getting better.
Well, I guess I would just start by saying, being alcoholic myself, I know that no matter how anybody is behaving on the outside, that they would be filled with shame and guilt and fear and remorse and everything that you can think of, really not liking themselves at all. They may be behaving in some bravo way, pretending that they're feeling okay, or they may be crying their little hearts out, but underneath it all, they feel like lost little souls. It's a soul sickness. It is a soul sickness. And I make every effort, certainly, to try to help them get to a place where they will accept what their problem is, but also understand where they're at right then. and let them know that because it is a dis-ease, it is not a disgrace.
Right. I love that.
And so I try to get people to see that while a lot of things have happened in their life that they wished hadn't happened, that they have all this shame for the way they behave, they don't have to live that way anymore. There is hope for them. And because I am alcoholic, I am quite comfortable in sharing whatever I can that would maybe make them feel a little more at ease, to be able to begin just a little bit to share what it is that they are feeling, the loathing that they have for themselves, the regret that they have for their behavior. And just little by little, I tell them about myself, and then hopefully that will be that will make it comfortable enough that they can see they are not alone. I always think that addiction, alcoholism, drug addiction is the loneliest place to be. You just, and so misunderstood, so misunderstood. There's so much stigma to it. There are many people who still, certainly years ago, it was the case. Just pull up your socks. Just stop doing that. Don't drink so much. Can't you control it? When you know that this is doing what it's doing to you, why do you keep doing it? And on and on. Well, the reason they kept doing it is because they suffered from this disease. They didn't know there was a way out. And so I try to get them to see that I've been where they've been, felt like they've felt, but today I am able to live what I consider to be never perfection, but certainly progress, a spiritual life. And to me, that has meant so much. I am able myself to live the way I knew I should be living, wanted to be living, but just simply didn't know how to deal with my disease. But when I learned, then I've been able to pass it on to others, which is very rewarding, really.
I bet it is. I'm hearing a lot of compassion, and I'm hearing a lot of shared experience and being able to identify with what people are going through, and that helps to destigmatize and to break down some of those walls. And I can note that you talk about, it's emotional dis-ease, for those that didn't catch that, DIS-EASE, dis-ease, that there's a discomfort and a dysregulation that most people have, and then they're trying to self-soothe that. But I can note that most people that I deal with on a regular basis, it's not that they're unintelligent, right? It's not that they're... Sometimes
they're too smart. They think they've got it all figured out.
Do you see where I'm going with this?
I don't know.
Sometimes we overthink things and we overstep things and we intellectualize them too much, right? So where does that, where do you think that plays a role in people and what the stinking thinking and those cognitive things that people put into play?
Yeah. Well, I personally try to get people to see that thinking things through and whatever they think their intelligence might be, or whatever the brain power they think they might have, hasn't done them a whole lot of good. And that probably is... I have heard it said the people that maybe think they're the smartest have the most difficult time accepting the simplicity of what it is they have to do, because they've always got to be figuring something out. But I try to get them to see, I identify where they're at, have been there. But on the other hand, there is hope. And I try to get them to see that while that's what they've been doing and that's how they've been feeling, if they do a few simple things and will put their egos in their pocket and try to forget what it is they think they should know or do know, and just follow some simple directions, that they too can get better. Now, it's not easy to break through some of that.
I agree.
And sometimes people still want to try it their way. Keep trying, keep trying. But with some, you can break that down and get them to see there is a better way and an easier, softer way.
Yeah.
And you try to present that to them. And with some it works. I would like to say we're 100% successful. That's not true. But we're there to carry the message for those that I always say, first you learn to listen, and then you listen to learn.
Nice.
And if they'll do that, and attempt to try to stop doing the same things over and over with not good results, but the same results, if not worse, they can get well. We're not always successful.
Right. It's there's a lot to be said about being teachable and being humble.
That's right.
And being able to accept that, right? What is, I've heard you say hope a couple of times, and it's such a huge part, but I don't think a lot of people understand it or understand what it really truly means to provide hope. What does that mean for you, Bev?
Well, what it meant to me was I didn't know anybody. I simply did not know anybody that behaved like I did, had came from a great background, and yet ended up the way that I did. I didn't know anybody like that. But as I began to get into my own recovery, I began to meet people whose experience was in some cases like mine, and in some cases worse. And they were well. So that gave me hope.
I love it.
And when I spend time with others, I try to present to them the same hope that was given to me, I try to give to them.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that, Bev. So that brings us to the end of the episode. I thank you so much for being on here. I'd love to have you back again or to visit or something and see you again. So thank you again for being on the show.
I just loved every minute of it.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much, Dean.
Awesome. Thank you for watching Invisible, Breaking Through the Stigma of Addiction. We'll see you next time.